Welcome to Personal Injury Marketing Minute.
Welcome to the Personal Injury Marketing Minute, where we quickly cover the hot topics in the legal marketing world. I'm your host, Lindsey Busfield, the Vice President and Partner over at Optimize My Firm. Today, I'm joined by Bill Biggs, the President and Co-founder of Fireproof Masterminds. Bill works with law firms on leadership, culture, organizational structure, and team performance, helping firms build systems and teams that can scale effectively over time. Today, we're talking about coaching legal teams in the modern era, what law firm leadership looks like today, and why culture, accountability, and development have become such an important part of growth. Thank you so much for joining us today, Bill. I am so excited to have you here.
Hey, Lindsay, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, you are the coaching guy, you're the culture guy. And so, I want to pick your brain about all things coaching and culture when it comes to building better legal teams. So, when you look at law firms today, what feels most different about leading and coaching teams compared to even 5 or 10 years ago?
That's a great question. And I mean, thanks for that introduction. I enjoy those things. I enjoy coaching. I don't know if I'm the guy, but I really, it's a part of who I am. It's a part of my identity. So it's been a good ride so far. What looks different from 5 years ago? It's interesting. Agility, the ability to change and to use a buzzword, pivot. I think now that ability, that characteristic, probably among leaders, individuals, team members, whole teams, that is not talked about enough and becoming almost critical, almost necessary in order to be successful in the current environment in legal and probably many industries. But because of the rise of technology, AI obviously is taken the legal industry by storm. If you're not able to change quickly and adapt, so that's another term you might use for it, adaptability, agility. But fundamentally, if you can't change quickly and adopt new technologies, new systems, it's going to be hard to keep up.
It is. And as you said, we have all these new technologies that are emerging, and it's only going to be changing faster over time. Whereas 10, 15, 20 years ago, we had email started to replace secretaries, and the internet came along and sped things up and gave instant access to information. And that felt like a huge, rapid change that impacted both operations as well as culture. And now we have different technologies that you are fueled by AI that are going to even more rapidly speed up this growth. And it's not just changing the operations in a blanket sort of way. It is changing how people interact with operations and how people manage both themselves as well as the technology. So, what role does coaching and training and leadership and culture play in that technological advancement?
So, as it pertains to culture, I would say, I believe culture is at its root, it has to do with what you believe about your clients, what you believe about the people you work with, what you believe about your team, and what you believe about the purpose of what you're doing. So, culture's been a big part of my career and trying to really learn what it means, and so I believe you measure the quality of the culture in your organization by looking at how strongly does your team believe in one another, how strongly do they believe in the client, and how strongly do they believe in the purpose of what you do. The higher those things are, um, the better your culture is. And so, how does culture now play a part? Well, I'm now making as a part of what I would say great culture looks like. A great culture also involves a group of people who understand that change is a part of the process, that change is now required, or adaptability, agility is required for excellence. And that's probably always been true, but I don't know that it's ever been more true than it is today. And so in coaching, whether that's an individual or a team, a whole firm, I think it's lowering anxiety about the changes that happen all around us. helping people trust one another in the midst of changes, and helping people stay focused on making sure that the client is taken care of. So if you're doing that, lower that anxiety so people are more receptive and responsive, and we can all get better at that. I've learned a lot of that through failure of, trying to change things too quickly or try to coach too strongly. Those things can happen. So I've learned a lot by by not doing the right thing, right? By making a bad decision, a bad move here or there. But I think at the end of the day, great coaching means you're going to lower the anxiety of the team, of the people. You're going to help them focus on what's most important, and then you're going to give them the tools that they need to be successful.
And that is so important because that anxiety is out there, and identifying the root causes of the anxiety internally is huge because you have a team that has gotten used to their systems. They have gotten used to their operations. They've gotten used to their case management softwares, and they are now seeing AI be able to replace a lot of the tasks that they have been doing historically. And there might be that anxiety that they might get replaced. But coaching them, reducing that anxiety, teaching them how to bend with the technology and manage the technology rather than having the technology manage them can help alleviate some of that anxiety. And I would also imagine that there's a lot of anxiety rooted around not knowing what products or softwares or adaptations are out there that other competing law firms are bringing in to get the edge. And there are agencies that are feeding that anxiety,
Yeah,
saying,
for
you
sure.
must buy my latest and greatest software if you're going to stay ahead. And that's an anxiety. So, that fear of missing out, the fear of buying the wrong
Yep.
software when you have all these new things. So, having someone come in and identify those pain points, those anxiety points, and create a roadmap to here is how you can become successful and calm
Yeah.
at the other end of it is a huge value.
It it is. If you meet somebody who can do that, please let me know. I would like to learn from them. Um, but no, you're right. Helping people through that process, and especially right for the team, it is about, oh my gosh, are these changes going to replace me? For the owners and the leadership of the firms, it's, am I changing fast enough? Am I adopting the right things? Like you said, do I have the latest and greatest? This is something that issue right there is something that I've been thinking on a lot because a lot of the folks in the space, even the folks who have developed the new technologies and own these companies, these are friends of mine. These are people that I care about as friends and that I believe in what they're doing. But they're also competing, right? And so, trying to determine what is the best path, what's a protocol or a mindset that can turn into a protocol of how a firm approaches adopting new technology, adopting new systems. I think that's very needed right now, and so I'm spending a lot of time thinking about that and wanting to make sure we don't the firms that I'm involved with and the industry as a whole don't get involved in a game of perpetual leapfrog, right? Hopping over each other, one technology after the other, and adopting things perhaps too quickly. What's the pace, right? What's the right timing to adopt a new technology? Do we want to be the people who are wrapped around the corner of the iStore before the iPhone 28 version of IXL comes out, or the second mouse gets the cheese, right? Where you say we don't have to be the first to adopt. We want to take a step back, wait and see what's going to happen, so that we can make the most informed decision. Somewhere in there, right, is the right step for the firm, and it's critical to understand who you are as a firm and how to make those decisions so that you stay ahead of the game, but that you also don't disrupt your team so much that it has a crippling effect.
And I think that there are several factors that you can look at when you are trying to assess what your appetite for change is. And one is your appetite for risk, because some of these technologies are very risky. And one of the examples that I think about is AI in intake, where 6 months ago, we were seeing some really big problems with intake and AI. But there were those attorneys out there that were just so hungry for new technology that they bought into it and cost themselves a lot of money because the technology just wasn't there yet. And that's not to say that there aren't some great intake AI companies out now, but it's where's your appetite for risk? And then you also have to look at your the size of your law firm, your corporate culture, and what their appetite for change is, and making sure that these things align in a way that is still going to give you a decent ROI, but you have that margin there that you're not dependent or completely crashed out because of a bad investment. So there are so many different factors to look at.
All right, you said it very well. It's very, very true. And knowing your know thyself is, if it's not step one, it's right up there close to the top. Because if you misidentify, if you think that you're something you're not, if you think that you're super agile and you're not, that could be a disaster, right? So those are good words, wise words.
Well, and it all feeds into what you talk about with defining and developing your corporate culture. And this is something that you have spoken on in depth. And I would love to hear your thoughts for those who might not be familiar with the difference between just having a corporate culture and then really defining and putting it in place.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. It's so rooted in success and not just monetary success, but I also define that success for a firm, for an individual, is the things that are important to you, and are you proud of what you've created? So, yeah, in terms of defining that culture and what it looks like, what it means, the role that it plays, it's so critical. And at the end of the day, every firm has a culture. The question is it the culture you want? And is it by design, intention, strategy, or did it just happen? And that's because it's a manifestation of your values. It's a manifestation of what the leadership, the owner, the core, the highest leaders, the ones that everybody's looking to. Uh, Culture is going to be a manifestation of what they believe and how well they live out those values, those things that they believe. And I also think over time, I've come to believe that you can decide on that. You can say, "You know what? Maybe as a firm owner, you're so driven, you're extremely entrepreneurial, and you realize over time you become self-aware. People have shared feedback with you, and hopefully you've received it, and you realize, "Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of nurture in me." And I find that people may feel that I'm just so driven, or that I overlook them. Right? That's common for entrepreneurs. Well, if you're self-aware and you can see that and you can sense it, and that that's probably not going to be a quality that will help build a strong team that has longevity and perseverance, then you say, all right, I need to balance me out with someone who can come in and bring that element. Not because it naturally flows through you, but actually because you realize that it doesn't. And so you need to bring balance to it. And some people would look at that as kind of in the EOS model of the visionary and the integrator, but it can take a lot of different forms where great leaders realize that culture and what they know a team needs, they're not gonna bring all those skills to the table. Nobody is. And so assembling the right leadership that exemplifies the values that are important, I think that is a real key step in helping manifest and realize the culture that you believe is important. But first you gotta do that, right? The first step is deciding what's important about how we treat each other, treat our clients, and why we're here in the first place.
And I think the whole why we're here in the first place thing is so important. And it's a step that a
Yeah.
lot of law firms overlook because you need to know why you're here. Otherwise, what's the point of having this law firm when there are 30 other law firms in your market that are doing the exact same thing? So it's having your corporate culture and making it stand apart from every other option out there in a way that is authentic to you, that is genuinely in line with your values,
Yeah.
and is supported by your team.
Yeah, that's so true. And some people might say, "Oh, well, that's a little fuzzy or ooey gooey." Even the idea of culture and all of that, and soft skills or team that doesn't appeal to everybody, especially strong entrepreneurial types. But I would argue this that when you take some time to define your purpose, to define your why, even though it's an existential question, right? When you do that, it actually has an impact that is highly practical and pragmatic. And here's why that happens. When you define your purpose well, and then you say, all right, we are going to flow all of our decisions and all of everything we design about system, process, strategy, the day to day, how things happen, the checklist in our case management system. We are going to flow all those decisions through this lens of why are we here? What is our purpose? And so if you say our purpose, our core purpose is to do what's best for the client, right? If that's something along the lines of your purpose, then if you look at everything you do and you flow those decisions about how you design everything through that purpose of we're going to take great care of the clients, then it begins to have very practical and hands-on implications. But it came from your why. It came from your purpose. And the other reason that it has a very practical and powerful implication is because then it streamlines that. You become faster at what you do when you know clearly why you're doing it, right? Because there's no hangups, there's no stop and starts, or not as many. And the third thing is people will be drawn to that. People are drawn to that consistency when they say, oh, everything that we do in our firm, everything that happens in this firm that I work for, it has a reason. And it all goes back to this purpose. People like that. That provides a stability, it's safety, lowers anxiety, and they can be faster when they do that. Stephen Covey wrote a phenomenal book called that is not read enough. I don't hear people talk about it enough, called The Speed of Trust. And he talks about how when you can establish trust quickly among a group of people, right? And having a strong purpose that you clearly articulate and that you consistently live out helps build trust. When teams have trust among them, they operate faster. They become faster at everything they do because the hangups, the questioning, the suspicion, the hesitance, it gets lowered substantially. They trust each other, they trust their leader, so they run fast.
And I love the example that you used with, is this best for the client? Let's say that that is your core driving value, because that can, even beyond just saying, okay, well, we're going to do this because I believe it's best for the client. You can get more granular and even more practical from that by defining what is best to the client in terms of what is most important to the client. So if you believe that for your client's communication is number one, their settlement amount is number two, and transparency is number three, then the softwares that you evaluate, well, how do those align with transparency and maxing values and communication? So that can help lead some really great practical guiding decisions throughout this whole process. And you're right, it does lower the pushback that you get from your team, because you can say, well, this aligns with goal number one, goal number two, and goal number three for our overarching goal. And it just makes the development of that corporate culture that much easier, and to buy in so much, much less resistance against. So I think that that's a fantastic.
It does, and one little piece there that also helps the speed, the agility, is it also helps the leaders decide who they want to pick to be on their team. It streamlines that process as well, because if they get in fact, it may cause that process itself to be a little bit longer on the front end because they're more selective and
Mhm.
more particular, but, as the example we used earlier, if you say, "You know what? We need a team that not only trusts each other, that believes in our values, but that also understands that we need to be flexible and adaptable and agile as we move into this next season of our industry. If now I'm selecting people with that quality and I'm looking for ways to measure that in applicants and candidates, and I hit, 95% of my hires, and they're all, they 95% of my hires are adaptable and agile and embrace change, and they it's not crippling for them. Wow, that organization is going to be a lot healthier, and it's probably going to have a stronger bottom line faster than one that didn't take the time to say, we need to pick the right people, and the right people look like this.
And all of this comes back to being intentional and having intentionality behind the decisions that you're making. And that can't happen unless you really understand your why in a practical way. And there are so many tips and tools that you have in terms of operations and building this corporate culture. And I know that you do a lot of this through Fireproof Masterminds. So, for those who are not familiar with Fireproof, talk to us a little bit about Fireproof Masterminds and your involvement there and what attorneys can get out of that.
Yeah, I love it. I love what we're doing there, and Mike Morse and John Knockhazel started Fireproof several years ago. They wrote the book. A lot of people know about the book. A little over 2 years ago, John and I invited him to do an event with me, and we had kind of had parallel career paths in some ways as operators in the industry, and I don't think he would mind me saying we kind of when we met, we kind of had a bromance a little bit, right? That we were like, oh man, love what you do. I love what you're doing. Oh, I've heard so many good things. And so we said someday, man, it'd be fun to do something. So we did this event. I invited him to do this event. It went really well. And after that, he and Mike and I began to talk about masterminds and what we might be able to do under that fireproof umbrella. And masterminds were not a new thing in the industry. There have been a lot of people that have done great and continue to do great masterminds. Many of them, most of them, all people that I know or am friends with. But there was just something we said, we can put a lot together here between the three of us, and then adding Kelly Williford. It just the team that they had, the resources that we could put together. We just said we think we can do something that will fill a need in the industry. And basically, it's this: you get a group of firms together, group of firm owners, and their top leaders. You keep that group to about 8 to 12 firms. Those firms are grouped by their size, their revenue size. So, you don't want to have a $50 million law firm and a $2 million law firm. They don't have the same problems. They're not at the same place. So we group them by their revenue, and we group them by exclusivity to a market. And in fact, every one of our groups, which now we're approaching almost 10 groups, we're going to hit the 100 firm mark probably by this summer. And it's grown faster than anything I've ever seen before. It's now the largest mastermind program in the country. But the reason is because when we group those firms together by revenue, by market, we also give them they can veto. When a firm has to apply to be in the group, right? And when they do, any firm in that group, and we keep them from 8 to 12, meaning we start a group when it's at about 8 firms, we cap it at about 12. When a firm applies to be in there, any one of the existing firms can veto them for any reason, not just market. And the reason, and then once you're in, you then get that power as well. The reason is trust, again, because when you're in that room, we require that you share financials. We require that you share pretty close to 300 KPI data points. Now, if you don't have them yet, which most don't, we teach you, we coach you on how to do that. But when they do that, they sign the confidentiality agreement, sign that NDA, they're coming in, man, it is vulnerable, right? You're showing your financials, you're walking into the room pretty much in your underwear. And no, we really haven't done that. That's you know, we're not, yeah, that's a
That's a
different
different
one.
mastermind, right?
We, but you come into that environment and you're vulnerable. And interestingly enough, I think there's a hunger for that because you're seeing the truth. There's no conjecture. You can peacock if you want to, but you're going to have some something that you're really good at, and then you're going to have something that you're not the best at all in the room. When you're doing that consistently, we have monthly meetings via Zoom and then 2 in-person meetings throughout the year that are intense, right? Because they're driven by that data, and everyone is seeing everyone else's data. And that's the agenda. We go through, and it's basically an audit. It's an audit with encouragement and advice and ideas. And you learn so much in that environment. It is, not to steal from a great book that was written years ago, but it's rocket fuel. I mean, it does. You can zoom pretty fast when you have the truth and you have great ideas and you see how to fix stuff and you see what's broken. Man, you can grow really fast, and you're doing it in an encouraging environment. It's grown like wildfire, no pun intended, but it's been phenomenal. We're loving it, and it's growing.
And I love that it's so data driven. And because those numbers drive accountability, the people who are in this mastermind group have invested substantially to be in there and to be networking and really gaining insights from everybody that they're surrounded by who have either been where they are recently or yeah, have recently grown out of that. So the information that they're getting and the mentoring that they're getting from their peers is invaluable when you are showing up with real data as opposed to just getting some fluffy you can do it. It's going to make a huge difference in a hurry. And by knowing that in a couple of months you're going to have to show this all over again and show that you have grown, that's some real accountability right there.
It is, and they're choosing to do it, right? And so that's awesome to see. It's awesome to see firms that don't just wanna be around other firms and tell stories about how great they are, which, from time to time, we may see that in our industry. People like to talk about how great. It's phenomenal to see. Yeah, yeah, that's what we call it, right? We celebrate the wins. Um, yeah, it's great to do that, but man, when you come in and you're willing to talk about the losses as well, and then dissect them, and then, analyze them and say, "How can I get better?" And you've got 4 other firms around you of the 10 that are in the room that said, "Oh, yeah, we were right there 6 months ago. Here's what we did, and here's what we're glad we didn't do, or here's what we did and wish we hadn't of." Right? And what it costs, and this is not a pitch, what we charge to be in that group, it's exponentially paid for typically after the first meeting because of the mistakes you avoid and the good decisions you embrace quickly.
Right. You are just constantly learning from failures, whether your own or others, and figuring out the pitfalls that others have fallen into and how to get out of your own. So, if you have one piece of advice that to leave us on that will help attorneys improve leadership or their corporate culture, what is that piece of advice? Where's a good place to start?
And there's been so much good advice given in this industry, but I'll go back to one of the foundational bedrock pieces, and that is run your law firm like a business. Approach your law firm like a business. That'll actually make you a better lawyer. It'll make you a better law firm owner or leader if you'll approach it like a business. Get organized, get your data, put together an organization that has intentionality and strategy and values, build it, architect it, right? That's a business, not just putting out a shingle, putting out a sign and saying, I graduated from law school and now I'm gonna start a law firm. Yeah. Let's make it a business, and then it can scale, it can grow, and you can make it turn into, if you're dedicated, motivated, and learning, probably whatever success looks like, you'll probably be able to attain it. The resources are there to do that.
And that's great advice. And it's something that I was actually talking about with an attorney the other day, where law school prepares you really well to be a lawyer, but you have to advance your education after that, whether it's through mastermind groups or peers or self learning to really operate as a business. Well, thank you so much for coming on our podcast today. This will wrap up this episode of the Personal Injury Marketing Minute. If you want to learn more about Bill Biggs and Fireproof, you can find them online at the link that we'll put in the notes. And if you're a personal injury firm thinking about how leadership, operations, and marketing can connect to long-term growth, reach out to me at optimizemyfirm.com. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe and do all the things so that you don't miss another episode. Thank you again, Bill. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, Lindsey. Loved it. Enjoyed it very much. Appreciate the invite.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.